Welcome back to Unleash the Ghouls for another honest review where we finally get our hands on the second season of Invincible, which has dropped today on Amazon Prime. After a 2-year-long hiatus, saying I'm hyped about this new season is a large understatement. As with all of our honest reviews, I will be delving into key plot details as I recap and review the episode, so this is your major spoiler warning. And we've just dropped our first video on our second channel, The Horror Exchange, so if you fancy checking that out, the link's down below. Let's get into it. Well, the end of season 1 left us with this bombshell to digest and process. Nolan had spent 20 years on Earth not to protect it and raise his son with his wife Debbie, but to weaken it. Starting a family was purely just a side quest, and he even referred to Debbie as more of a pet than anything else, just to add salt to the wounds. Season 1 was so powerful for me because of how uncompromising the narrative was. That final episode where Mark is being bullied and manhandled by his dad, whilst innocent bystanders are being murdered as collateral damage, was beyond brutal. Beaten to a pulp, Mark still displays love for his father though, who shows a slither of compassion and blasts off into space, fleeing Earth. The question that I had going into season 2 was, well, what the hell does Mark do at this point? And we find out very, very quickly in the opening segments of this episode, which is really split into 2 separate time periods. The episode opens with Invincible and Omni Man raining destruction down onto Chicago. It's a war zone. Invincible is in the middle, fighting Immortal, which appears to be a fairly even battle. That's a clean and fair fight, before Omni-Man then flies through Immortal, severing his arm, before ripping off his other arm and decapitating him with that trademark karate chop. Invincible then picks up Immortal's head and crushes it in his hands to loosely contribute, to say the least. I was immediately taken back by this, thinking that it was probably going to be one of Mark's nightmares about becoming his dad or siding with him, but it wasn't. His face is all over the Chicago billboards preaching propaganda about joining the Viltrum Empire and to stop resisting, and that joining the Empire would somehow eradicate hunger, cancer, and that nobody can mess with Earth ever again. It's a delusional message that I just wasn't expecting. We're introduced very early to a character called Angstrom, who is seen down below on the streets of Chicago climbing into a school bus that has a secret elevator to an underground hideout where some of the Guardians of the Globe are. Robot is there with his new body and with his original incubated self, alongside Adam Eve, who now has a shaved head, probably to connote with the fact that she means business and is part of the resistance. Omni-Man and Invincible crash through the roof, finding all of the refugees and begin massacring everything. Robot is slashed in half, and the incubator housing his physical being is smashed to bits, seeping out the liquid keeping him alive. And then Mark flies off after Eve to have their own personal battle with each other. And then it happens. Eve resists and resists until Mark gets a hold of her and reassures Eve that he'd never kill her. After everything that they've been through in season 1, the team-up missions that they embarked on and the friendship that they've built, snap, he just breaks her neck, but not to kill her, just to incapacitate her permanently, completely paralysing Eve and confining her to a lifetime of vegetation. Nolan then rocks up and jokes with him saying, "Oh, so that's what you were practicing on those protesters last week." It was premeditated. Connor posted a video called Omni-Man is Nightmare Fuel, which we'll link to down below. But is Invincible now going to be the same? Man, this is just what is so good about this show. It doesn't mess about whatsoever. Season 1, episode 1 blew me away 2 years ago, and they've gone and done it again inside 5 minutes of season 2. The episode then takes a well-deserved breather, thankfully, and steps back in time to around a month after the events of the finale. It's just Mark and Debbie now who are left to deal with the emotional fallout of Nolan going AWOL. Mark is finding life tough. He's physically pretty much healed, but suffering emotional damage, and his ego has taken a massive knock. Because he was completely outmatched by his dad, he didn't stand a chance in that fight. It was a one-sided beatdown, but he does have a strong support network to rely on, and when returning to school, Amber reconnects with him. Evidently they're now back together, and they even open up their college acceptance letters, finding out they'll be attending the same institution. Even Todd, the school bully, hugs Mark and attempts to make him feel better. But Mark and Eve have their own conversation away from everyone on the school rooftop about what happened and how he should probably get back into the superhero game sooner rather than later, as confronting what you're afraid of is generally the best way to conquer those demons. Mark agrees with this, and they go to see Cecil to see if he'll allow Mark to continue working with the Guardians of the Globe. The other storyline running parallel to this is around the new character, Angstrom. Angstrom has the ability to create portals that lead to other dimensions, and he uses this to break the Mauler twins, or Mauler clones, out of their incarceration. I'm just so glad that these two have made a return for season 2. I really like their character and chemistry, if you pardon the pun, in the first season. They're not just stupid criminals used to stroke the ego of the Guardians, they have a large amount of intelligence and calculation to their character, which Angstrom identifies and seeks to use as leverage. His aims are to bring about global peace by collating the knowledge of alternative versions of himself from alternative realities and uploading it into his conscience, making him omniscient. He needs the Maulers to build a machine for him, and it's a really interesting concept, I think, for the season opener, and I can't wait to discover what Angstrom's true intentions actually are. Meanwhile, the Guardians of the Globe are fighting a giant villain named, well, Giant, and are seemingly having a bit of a hard time bringing him down. After the fight, Cecil calls a meeting to appraise the performance of the Guardians, criticising their lack of leadership as the main cause of their struggles. He appoints the Immortal as their new leader, relegating Robot from that position, and adds a bit of muscle to the group, recruiting another hero called Bulletproof. Cecil also agrees that Mark can rejoin the Guardians and help them on missions, providing that he's on a very, very tight leash, and he drops in on the operation that the Maulers and Angstrom are having. Process for transferring all knowledge from the other dimensions has begun, and the Maulers and Mark begin having a scrap before Angstrom summons all other versions of the Maulers from other dimensions to help fight Mark. He does manage to get the better of them all, causing an explosion which results in the Maulers and Angstrom disappearing, but his face, well, let's just say it's reminiscent of how it looked after the showdown with his dad, which I thought was a very clever inclusion here to give the audience that little bit of PTSD. The episode ends with Mark walking down the street in his civilian clothing, and Immortal dropping in on him, saying that the Guardians may trust him, but he doesn't, and that he'll be watching him very closely. And what I find really interesting is we already know what happens to Immortal. He gets snapped like a toothpick by Nolan, just like we know what happens to Adam Eve. She has her neck broken by Mark. This is very similar to how season 1 started. We already know the twist in a way, and I can't wait to see how the writers continue to surprise us along the way, despite the audience already being aware of how things turn out. But that's it for episode 1. Wow, it was everything I expected it to be and more, to be honest. It certainly met my expectations. The tonality of Invincible is exactly the same, and it's a direct continuation from season 1 with zero lag between the finale and the opener. It gets a massive, massive thumbs up from me, but let me know down in the comments what you thought of episode 1. Was it what you were expecting? Did you think Mark would harness his Viltrum abilities like this? Let me know all your thoughts and feelings. I've been your host Hugh from Unleash the Ghouls. Don't forget to check out our second channel, The Horror Exchange, and I'll see you next time for another honest review.